Welcome back to Module 3, Wellness Counseling in Action. We're now going to move into Chapter 10, Treatment Planning. If you don't know where you are going, you'll end up someplace else. Treatment planning is important as it provides a roadmap for both the counselor and the client, and it is co-constructed in a means of creating shared understanding, shared hope, and shared language about the wellness goals. Our text talks about how treatment planning can be broken into a three-tiered intervention approach. We can think about treatment planning as primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary intervention. Primary prevention includes mainly psychoeducation and generalized populations. An example of this might be taking part in a group training where wellness is a focus, but there is not individualized approach. We or our clients might go to a workshop about wellness and leave with a plan, but wouldn't have ongoing check-ins or that individualized follow-up in this primary prevention category. With secondary prevention, we're looking at early identification. This is an important tier to the three-tiered intervention as early identification leads to more positive outcomes. In the tertiary intervention, we're looking at an intervention after a problem has already been identified, and the goal is to prevent exacerbation of that problem. Wellness intervention planning is collaborative and a continuous process. The authors of our text suggest the following steps. Review holistic, formal, informal assessment data. Discuss this with the client and process results. Identify areas of focus. Co-create goals. Select interventions appropriate for goals. Assess competence and commitment. Assess goal attainment throughout the therapeutic work, and adjust goals as needed along the way. It is important to note that this is not a linear process and will often be going back and forth throughout these steps. Intervention planning. At the primary level, like we talked about, we will mostly be working with large groups, maybe in a workshop type setting. We're going to encourage commitment and a written goal, even though it's not in that individual setting. A great way to help participants be more successful with their goals is to encourage them to utilize a SMART goal, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this chapter. Secondary and tertiary levels of intervention planning include implementing the trans-theoretical model, matching the change process and change technique to the client's stage of change for the best outcomes, and considering the stage of change. You may remember that in your wellness plan outline, we asked you to assess your stage of change. When we asked about this, we were referring to the stages of change of pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Go ahead and turn to page 190 to take a look at the stages of change and the change process techniques. The change processes include conscious raising, catharsis, self-reevaluation, environmental reevaluation, self-liberation, counter-conditioning, stimulus control, contingency management, social liberation, and therapeutic relationship. The change processes are common to many of the counselor theories, and you'll notice that some of the change processes are insight and awareness focused, while others are more action oriented. We can match the change processes to the client's stage of change. Looking at the stages of change, we move from pre-contemplation all the way through maintenance, and this isn't a linear process. Sometimes we will go back and forth throughout these stages. In pre-contemplation, the client is not even aware that a problem exists. In contemplation, they're beginning to become aware that a problem exists and are considering making some changes. In preparation, the client is ready to take action in the near future. In the action stage, the client has already started to take some action toward change. And then in the maintenance stage, the client has experienced some positive change for more than 6 months. Now that we've reviewed these stages of change, consider where you might place yourself with your own wellness plan. And go ahead and pull that back up to make any modifications to the stages of change. Some of you were already within the action stage when you first started with your wellness plan by taking steps toward meeting your goal. For example, somebody had talked about getting an alarm versus using their phone, and that would show evidence of being in the action phase. Brainstorming and goal setting. As wellness counselors, we want to initiate a collaborative conversation with the client about their wellness domains, strengths, and goals. The therapeutic relationship contributes significantly to the counseling outcomes. The relationship can be enhanced through development of mutually agreed upon goals. This comes back to that shared understanding and shared wellness, shared language, and shared hope that we mentioned when we were reviewing Chapter 9 and Strength-Centered Counseling. Now we're going to take a quick look at SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-related. Using SMART goals when we are goal setting with clients will help us identify really specific, measurable, and relevant goals for the client, but also will help us identify progress and track success moving forward. SMART goals that are specific create a shared understanding between the counselor and the client about the expectations. A specific SMART goal also focuses on what the client will be doing instead of what they won't be doing. Next, we're going to look at what it means to be measurable. We want to quantify our goals looking at the intensity, frequency, and duration so that it can help us determine if we need to make adjustments to the intervention along the way. SMART goals are also attainable. When we look at whether the goal is attainable or not, we need to consider if it's realistic and reasonable for the client, given their current wellness and current situation. If we set a goal that is too high of expectations, that would leave the client in a position to potentially be disappointed and let down. Versus if we don't set a goal that's challenging enough, that also would hinder the client's potential wellness. Next, we're going to look at SMART goals that are relevant. Relevant goal means that the client connects with that goal and it's meaningful to the client. And last, we want a goal that's time related. So we want to be specific in keeping the client accountable for what action is going to be taken place within which amount of time. Our text also talks about using solution-focused questioning to help our clients develop goals. We'll talk more about solution-focused work in the future chapter of Module 3. However, let's take a look quickly at some of the question prompts related to solution-focused questioning for goal setting. On page 189, you'll find some of these questions. When things are going well with your physical wellness, what is going on at that time? Or, tell me about some times when your social life was going really well. What kind of things were you doing? What are you going to be doing instead of arguing with your partner? If you could wake up tomorrow and you were implementing your ideal, balanced wellness plan, what would that look like? Solution-focused questioning can help us help our clients determine what goals will be most relevant and attainable for them. Selecting interventions. When we're considering the most appropriate intervention for wellness counseling, we want to consider the following. Is this an evidence-based intervention? We should be referring to current research and professional literature to stay up to date with the best practices. We also want to consider client readiness. We talked about considering the stage of change and utilizing motivational interviewing to enhance and move the client along through the stages of change and identify their ambivalence. We'll also want to consider the client culture, religion, and values, and our scope of practice. If something falls outside of our scope of practice but appears to be very important to the client, we should consider appropriate collaborations to also foster wellness outside of what we might be able to provide. Treatment planning review. Treatment planning review. In this chapter, we looked at the levels of intervention, wellness intervention planning, brainstorming goal setting, SMART goals, and selecting appropriate interventions. We talked also specifically about considering your stage of change as it relates to your wellness plan. If you didn't get a chance to take a few moments to reflect upon that and pull up your wellness plan outline, go ahead and do that now. We'll be back with Chapter 11 as we continue with Module 3.